My husband's family always looked down on me, calling me unworthy. He agreed and pulled away. 7 years later, I ran into him at a business gala. He didn't recognize me. I smiled and handed him a contract he never expected. My company had just bought his family's business. Silence followed. I slammed the folder on our kitchen counter so hard that Jason's coffee mug toppled over, black liquid spreading across his pristine white shirt. What the hell is this? My voice shook, finger jabbing at the damning evidence. A background check? Me. Like I'm some kind of criminal. Jason's face drained of color as he recognized the manila folder labeled, Claire Thompson, background, in his mother's unmistakable handwriting. The private investigator's report his family had commissioned revealed everything. My parents' modest income, my student loans, even photos of the small house where I grew up. Each page was marked with Vivian Wright's elegant script. Unsuitable, common, lacking refinement. Claire, I can explain. Jason reached for my hand but I stepped back, the betrayal still fresh, still burning. Did you know about this? Before you proposed to me. The tears threatened to fall, but I refused to give them the satisfaction. That moment was my first glimpse behind the Wright family facade. I just didn't know it was only the beginning. I had met Jason Wright at a charity fundraiser where I was working as an event coordinator. He was charming, attentive, and seemed genuinely interested in my ideas about sustainable business practices. When he proposed 6 months later, I believed I'd found my partner, my equal. The diamond ring on my finger blinded me to the warning signs. The slight hesitation when he introduced me to his mother, the appraising looks from his father, the whispered conversations that stopped when I entered rooms. 3 weeks before discovering the folder, Jason's mother Vivian had called me to discuss the engagement party. Nothing fancy, she had promised with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Just immediate family and a few close friends. The Wright estate sprawled across 5 acres of manicured lawns and gardens. Valets in crisp uniforms parked guests' luxury cars while waitstaff circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. This was Vivian's idea of nothing fancy. 200 of Boston's elite mingling beneath crystal chandeliers. Jason disappeared within minutes of our arrival, pulled away by his father to meet an old friend, who happened to be the governor. I stood alone, clutching my purse like a shield when an older server approached. "Miss Thompson? Mrs. Wright asked me to show you to your seat for dinner." He led me past the grand dining room where tables were being set with fine china and silver, through a swinging door, and into a smaller room where staff were preparing trays. "There must be some mistake," I said, staring at the single place setting wedged between stacks of extra napkins and water pitchers. The server's eyes flashed with pity. "Mrs. Wright was very specific. She said you'd be more comfortable here, observing how proper service is conducted." My cheeks burned with humiliation as I heard laughter from the main room. 20 minutes later, Jason found me still standing there, paralyzed with shock. "Claire, what are you doing back here? Everyone's seated." His genuine confusion made me wonder if he truly didn't know what his mother had done, or if he was simply a better actor than I'd given him credit for. When he led me to the main table, Vivian's smile never faltered. "Oh dear, there seems to have been a misunderstanding with the seating chart. I thought you might appreciate seeing how things operate behind the scenes, Claire. With your background in event planning." The emphasis made her meaning clear to everyone within earshot. I wasn't a guest. I was staff who had somehow stumbled into their world. That night, I confronted Jason about his mother's behavior. He sighed, running his hands through his hair in frustration. Not with his family but with me. "Mom's old-fashioned, Claire. She just needs time to adjust. You have to understand, she expected me to marry someone like Melissa Blackwell or Sarah Cavendish. People we've known our whole lives. People with the right pedigree, you mean?" The word tasted bitter on my tongue. His silence was confirmation enough. The pattern continued. Thomas Wright, Jason's father and CEO of Wright Delicacies, summoned me to his office one afternoon. The company had been in the family for generations, their gourmet food products stocked in high-end stores nationwide. The headquarters occupied a restored historic building downtown, all polished brass and mahogany. I arrived in a new suit, thinking perhaps this was an olive branch. Maybe Thomas had finally recognized that my business degree might be an asset to the family company. "Claire," he nodded without standing or offering his hand. Jason mentioned you've been looking for a position since graduation. Hope fluttered in my chest. Sir. My focus was marketing and product development. Thomas regarded me like I was a mildly interesting specimen under a microscope. We have an opening in the mailroom. It would give you a ground-level understanding of business operations. Where you belong, so to speak. The deliberate insult hung between us. I have a business degree, I said quietly. With honors. From Westfield State, he replied, not bothering to hide his disdain. This is a privilege, Claire. Most people would jump at the chance to get their foot in the door here, regardless of where they started. That evening, I overheard Jason on the phone as I approached our bedroom door. Dad, you can't seriously have offered her the mailroom. His voice was low, defensive at first, giving me a moment of hope before he continued. Yes, I understand she needs to earn her place, but... I held my breath, pressing closer to the door. You're right, Jason said after a long pause. She does have potential to improve. With the right guidance, she could eventually become presentable at company functions. Yes, I know what I'm taking on here. Taking on. Like I was a burden. A project. My fingers traced the engagement ring I once thought symbolized love but now felt more like a collar. Yet still I stayed, telling myself Jason would stand up to them eventually. That he loved me for who I was, not who they wanted me to become. The final humiliation arrived in an elegant silver box 1 week before our wedding day. Inside was a certificate for the Elizabeth Morrison Finishing School Executive Spouse Program, a 12-week course covering everything from proper table settings to conversational French. The handwritten note from Vivian read, "Perhaps this will help you belong. Best wishes, Mother Wright." My hands trembled as I showed Jason, hoping he would finally be as outraged as I was. Instead, his face brightened. See? Mom's making an effort. This is actually really thoughtful, Claire. These are skills that will help you navigate our world. Your world. The words escaped before I could stop them. I thought we were building our world. Together. He kissed my forehead, patronizing. Of course we are. But you have to admit there are certain things you weren't taught growing up. This is just filling in the gaps. In that moment, standing in our kitchen with the gift between us, I should have walked away. I should have seen that Jason Wright would never choose me over his family's approval, that he fundamentally agreed with their assessment of my worth. Instead, I walked down the aisle 3 days later, my father's arm linked through mine, my mother dabbing proud tears from her eyes in the front row. The right side of the church was filled with politicians, CEOs, and old-money Boston families who watched me with polite smiles and calculating eyes. I now pronounce you husband and wife. As Jason slipped the wedding band next to my engagement ring, I caught Vivian's eye over his shoulder. Her smile was victorious. The message was clear. The battle had just begun, and in her mind she was already winning. What none of them knew was that behind my teary bridal smile, something had hardened inside me. A seed of resolve planted by their cruelty would one day grow into the strength to walk away, and eventually to take everything they valued. But first I would learn exactly what I was up against. Married life in the Wright family was like drowning in slow motion. Each day another inch of water rose around me and no one else seemed to notice or care. Our first Thanksgiving as a married couple should have been a celebration. Instead, it became a ritual of exclusion that would repeat at every family gathering to follow. We gathered at the Wright estate, where Thomas carved the turkey with ceremonial precision while Vivian directed the staff with imperious gestures. When it came time for family photos, I stood beside Jason, smoothing my carefully selected dress. One Vivian had reluctantly approved. "Why don't you take the picture, Claire?" Vivian suggested, her voice sweet as poison. "You have such a good eye for these things." Before I could respond, a camera was thrust into my hands. I watched through the viewfinder as the Wright family, my family now supposedly, arranged themselves in perfect formation. Jason didn't even glance back as he took his place between his parents. "Smile," I instructed, my voice hollow. Later, when I mentioned it to Jason, he shrugged. "Mom just wants good family photos. We'll take one with you next time." But next time never came. At Christmas, I was dispatched to the kitchen to check on dessert, just as the photographer arrived. At Easter, I was tasked with entertaining distant cousins' children during the main family portrait. Each time, Jason's protests grew weaker, his excuses more practiced. I existed in the margins of the Wright family history, present but unrecorded, like a ghost haunting their perfect tableau. 6 months into our marriage, Jason began leaving fashion magazines on our coffee table, pages folded to articles about refreshing your look and subtle enhancements. "Darling," he said one evening as I flipped through yet another magazine he'd left out, "have you ever thought about doing something with your nose? Nothing major, just a little refinement." I touched my nose reflexively. "What's wrong with my nose?" Jason sat beside me, taking my hand in his. "Nothing's wrong with it. It's just that Mom mentioned." He stopped himself, but it was too late. "Your mother discussed my nose?" The hurt was instantaneous, like a slap. "She only wants what's best for us," Jason said, his voice taking on that patronizing tone I'd come to dread. "The annual shareholders meeting is coming up. You'll be photographed for the company newsletter. She thought you might want to present the best possible image." "For the right family brand, you mean?" My voice had gone cold. "Well, yes. It's important. You're a reflection of me now, and I'm a reflection of the company." The suggestions continued, growing more frequent and specific. My hair was too ordinary. Perhaps highlights would add sophistication. My jawline could use slight contouring. Even my walk wasn't right, too casual, lacking proper posture. Each criticism chipped away at the woman I'd been, replacing her with a project forever failing to meet specifications. The confidence that had once made Jason notice me at that charity event faded like a photograph left in the sun. The annual Wright Foundation Charity Gala marked our 1-year anniversary. I spent weeks preparing, studying guest lists, memorizing connections between Boston's elite families, practicing small talk about topics that interested the right circle. I even relented to Jason's pressure and had my hair styled the way Vivian preferred, an elegant updo that made me look more like her than myself. That night, I wore a black dress that cost more than my first car, standing beside Jason as he greeted investors and business associates with practiced charm. Vivian approached with a silver-haired man in an expensive suit. "Charles, I'd like you to meet Jennifer, Jason's wife," she said, her hand resting briefly on my arm. "It's Claire," I corrected automatically. Charles looked between us, sensing the tension. "Oh, of course. Claire." Vivian's laugh tinkled like broken glass. "I was just thinking of Jennifer Lopez. Doesn't she look a bit like her, Charles? Something about the features." The implication was clear. I was interchangeable with any other non-wasp face. Not worth remembering. Not worthy of the right name. Jason watched the exchange with a tight smile, saying nothing. Later, it happened twice more. Vivian introducing me as Jessica to a judge, then as Kathy to a congressman's wife. Each time Jason's defense grew weaker, until he stopped correcting her altogether. "It's just a slip of the tongue," he insisted on the ride home. "Mom meets hundreds of people at these events. She doesn't forget anyone else's name," I said quietly. "She remembers the housekeeper's 4 children by name." "You're being oversensitive. It's been a long night." He turned away, ending the conversation. That night, while Jason slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling and wondered when exactly I had become invisible in my own marriage. The final betrayal began with an ordinary Tuesday. Jason had left his briefcase in the hall when he rushed out for an early meeting. I noticed it while heading out for coffee with a friend, my increasingly rare attempt at maintaining a life outside the right orbit. I grabbed the briefcase, intending to drop it off at his office on my way. Inside my car, it tipped over, spilling some contents onto the passenger seat. As I gathered the papers, my hand froze over a small paper bag from a pharmacy. Inside were 2 pregnancy test kits with a yellow sticky note attached. "Vanessa, potential mother of a true right heir. Pick up champagne if positive. V." The handwriting was unmistakably Vivian's. The implication was unmistakably devastating. Who was Vanessa? My mind raced through every conversation, every event, every introduction. Then I remembered. Vanessa Holt, the daughter of Senator Holt, who had attended several Wright functions. Tall, blonde, impeccably bred, with family connections tracing back to the Mayflower. Everything I wasn't. I replaced everything exactly as I'd found it and delivered the briefcase to Jason's assistant without seeing him. That night I waited for him to mention it. To explain. To at least have the decency to lie to my face. Instead, he announced he would be working late all week preparing for the annual company retreat. "The Berkshire property this weekend?" I asked, my voice carefully neutral. Yes, all the executives and their spouses. He didn't meet my eyes. Except you shouldn't come this year. Mom thinks it's better to keep it strictly business. High-pressure negotiations with overseas partners. The retreat was always a family affair. Spouses were always included. Another exclusion, another erasure. I understand, I said, though I understood far more than he realized. Friday morning, after Jason left for the retreat, I made a decision. I drove to the Berkshire property, a sprawling lodge where the Wrights entertained important clients. I parked down the road and walked the familiar path through the woods that led to the back of the property. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the main lodge, I could see them all. Thomas holding court with executives, Vivian directing staff, various company officials mingling. And there was Jason, not in a business meeting, but sitting intimately close to a blonde woman on a secluded couch near the fireplace. Her hand rested on his arm as they laughed about something private. I watched, frozen, as Vivian approached them, beaming with approval. She handed them each a glass of champagne, raising her own in a toast I couldn't hear. I didn't need to. The celebration was clear. The future they were planning, one that didn't include me, was evident in every smile, every touch, every conspiratorial glance. As I turned to leave, numb with the final confirmation of my disposability, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the darkened window. A ghost at the edges of their world, watching a life that was never truly mine. That night, alone in the house Jason and I supposedly shared, I finally understood. The systematic destruction of my confidence, my identity, my place in the family. It had all been leading to this moment. I hadn't been a wife. I'd been a placeholder until someone worthy came along. I was nothing to them. But as I dried my tears and began to pack my things, I made a silent promise to myself. Someday I would be everything. I signed the divorce papers with a steady hand despite my shattering heart. The Wright family attorney watched me with barely concealed disdain, a man who'd spent the past month trying to bully me into accepting nothing while walking away. You understand that by waiving alimony, you're entitled only to what you brought into the marriage, he said, his voice dripping with condescension. I understand exactly what I'm walking away from, I replied, meeting his gaze. What he didn't know was that I had already taken something far more valuable than money. For 3 weeks while Jason was working late with Vanessa, I had been working late too, meticulously copying information from Jason's home office. Contract details, supplier agreements, production schedules. Jason, so certain of my irrelevance, had never bothered to hide his work files. His password was still our wedding date, a date he'd soon be eager to forget. Wright Delicacy's entire supply chain lay exposed in those documents. Their dependency on 3 key suppliers who provided their signature ingredients, exclusivity contracts set to expire within 2 years, and their shocking markup on products marketed as artisanal but mass-produced in factories that cut corners on quality. Most valuable was a folder marked International Expansion. Thomas Wright's 5-year plan to enter Asian markets with watered-down versions of their premium products. The margins would be astronomical, the quality compromised. Classic Wright business ethics. I walked out of the attorney's office owning nothing but the clothes on my back, my business degree, and the blueprint for the Wright family's vulnerabilities. They thought I was leaving with nothing. I knew I was leaving with everything I needed. My first stop wasn't a new apartment or a friend's couch. It was a bus terminal with a one-way ticket to Portland, Oregon, as far from Boston's claustrophobic social circles as I could reasonably get. The distance wasn't just geographical, it was existential. Claire Wright would disappear, and from her ashes, a new Claire Thompson would emerge. Portland welcomed me with its misty mornings and coffee shop entrepreneurs. I found a tiny studio apartment above a bookstore and paid 3 months' rent in advance, the last of my personal savings. That first night, sleeping on a bare mattress with rain tapping against the windows, I felt something unexpected: freedom. The transformation began the next morning. I walked into a salon with my long Wright-approved brown hair and walked out with a sharp auburn bob that would have given Vivian heart palpitations. The stylist, a woman with tattoo sleeves and kind eyes, studied my face as I sat in her chair. "This isn't just a haircut, is it?" she asked as she began cutting. "It's an exorcism," I replied, watching pieces of my old life fall to the floor. Next came the wardrobe. Gone were the conservative dresses and pearls that had never felt like me. I embraced colors and patterns that expressed rather than suppressed. Each new item was a declaration. I am not what they made me. The final touch was unexpected. A flyer for a voice and speech coach caught my eye outside a theater. Patricia was a former Broadway actress who now helped people find their authentic voice. During our first session, she listened to me speak, then nodded knowingly. "You've been trained to soften your natural cadence," she observed. "To round your vowels and adopt someone else's patterns. Boston Brahmin patterns, if I'm not mistaken." I hadn't even realized how thoroughly I'd internalized Vivian's speech lessons, how I'd been forced to erase the subtle Midwestern inflections from my childhood. "I want my voice back," I told Patricia. "Not just how I sound, but what I say." Over the next 3 months, as I reclaimed my authentic speech patterns, something else happened. I found my voice as a businesswoman too. The blueprint was taking shape. Then came the letter that changed everything. My grandmother Rose had passed away quietly in her sleep. We'd been close when I was growing up, but the right years had created distance. Another relationship sacrificed on the altar of my marriage. Now she was gone, and along with my grief came an unexpected inheritance. $30,000 and a box of personal effects. The money was a lifeline, but it was the box that proved priceless. Among her belongings were journals dating back to the 1960s, when she had worked as a recipe developer for a small specialty foods company called Heartland Harvest. The entries detailed her development of preserve recipes using unique combinations of fruits and herbs, recipes that sounded eerily familiar. One entry from September 1967 caught my eye. "Mr. Wright toured the facility today. Took special interest in my blackberry sage preserve. Asked many questions about the balance of sweetness with the herb notes. Said it was revolutionary. I'm flattered but wary of his interest." 3 months later, Heartland closed suddenly. "Sold to investors," they said. Today I saw my blackberry sage preserve in stores, with the Wright Delicacies label. No credit, no compensation. "Mr. Thomas Wright Sr. stole my work and is making a fortune. No one will believe a woman over a powerful man." I sat among my grandmother's things, stunned by the revelation. The signature Wright Delicacies blackberry sage preserve, their most profitable product for decades, had been stolen from my grandmother. The irony was almost too perfect. Wright Delicacies had been built on theft, just as their son had stolen years of my life. Grandmother Rose had given me more than seed money, she'd given me moral clarity. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about justice, about reclaiming what had been taken from both of us. With new purpose, I began researching Wright Delicacies' business practices more thoroughly. Through professional networking events, I accidentally bumped into Margaret Chin, who had been Wright's product development director before being abruptly terminated last year. Over coffee, Margaret's bitterness spilled out along with her insider knowledge. "Thomas had me developing this whole line of organic, sustainably sourced products. I created everything: supplier relationships, production methods, marketing concepts. Then he pulled the plug, said it wasn't on brand. 2 weeks later, I was let go because my position was redundant." She leaned forward, voice dropping. "But here's the thing, Thomas is wrong. The market is shifting towards sustainability. Wright Delicacies is so focused on tradition they can't see the future. They're vulnerable." Margaret wasn't the only one. I systematically connected with 6 former Wright employees, each sharing pieces of the puzzle. David from accounting revealed their cash flow weaknesses. Sarah from marketing explained how their brand was failing to connect with younger consumers. Carlos from operations detailed their outdated production facilities. Each conversation was carefully casual, each relationship cultivated without revealing my true connection to the Wright family. I was just Claire Thompson, a business school graduate interested in the specialty food industry. My Wright past was buried under my new appearance, new voice, new state, invisible but informing every move. The final piece fell into place during a sustainable business conference where I met Liam Carter, a food industry angel investor with a passion for ethical business practices. Unlike Jason, Liam actually listened when I spoke, his eyes lighting up as I outlined my vision for a different kind of food company. "The problem with traditional food corporations is they're built on exploitation of workers, of consumers, of the environment," I explained, thinking of my grandmother's stolen recipes. "There's room for a company that does better while doing well financially." Liam studied my business plan with growing excitement. "This isn't just idealistic. It's strategically brilliant. You've identified real market gaps. What I didn't tell him was that those gaps were specifically the ones Right Delicacies had created or ignored. Every aspect of my business plan for Thompson Roots was designed not just to succeed, but to succeed at their expense. Where Right Delicacies was hierarchical, Thompson Roots would be collaborative. Where they exploited suppliers, we would partner with them. Where they cut corners on quality to increase profits, we would prioritize integrity. And we would begin with a blackberry sage preserve based on my grandmother's original recipe, the one that had launched the Right empire. I'd like to be your silent partner, Liam offered after our third meeting. You have the vision and the drive. I have the capital and connections. 1 month later, Thompson Roots consisted of one employee, me, working out of a small commercial kitchen with my grandmother's journals open beside me as I recreated her recipes. But in my mind, I could already see the empire it would become. An empire built specifically to dismantle the House of Right, brick by brick. They had spent years making me invisible. Little did they know, invisibility had become my superpower. Thompson Roots grew like the very plants we championed, organically, steadily reaching toward the light. Our first year was lean but purposeful. While Right Delicacies mass-produced their preserves in industrial facilities, I built relationships with small Oregon farms, ensuring every ingredient in our jars could be traced to its source. The farm-to-table model wasn't just ethical, it was strategic. Right Delicacies relied on large-scale suppliers who provided lower-quality ingredients at volume discounts. Their contracts had exclusivity clauses but only with major producers. The small family-owned farms I partnered with flew completely beneath their radar. I don't understand why you're bothering with these tiny operations, Liam said during our quarterly review. The profit margins would be higher if we consolidated suppliers. I showed him the numbers I'd never share publicly, our projected growth curve intersecting with Right Delicacies' market share in exactly 3 years. Every jar we sell is one they don't. Every farm we partner with strengthens local agriculture, which happens to be the exact opposite of Right's industrialized approach. Liam's eyes widened as understanding dawned. You're not just building a company. You're building an anti-right machine. I prefer to think of it as justice with a business plan, I replied. Each decision I made served dual purposes. When I chose eco-friendly packaging, it wasn't just to appeal to environmentally conscious consumers. It was because Right Delicacies had invested millions in proprietary plastic containers that were becoming increasingly unpopular with younger demographics. When I prioritized fair wages and profit sharing for employees, it wasn't just ethical business practice. It was because Right's notoriously high turnover created constant quality control issues they struggled to address. When I focused on transparency in our supply chain, highlighting the names and stories of our farmers on each label, it wasn't just good marketing. It was because Right's deliberately obscured sourcing was becoming a liability in an age where consumers demanded authenticity. Our modest success in the Pacific Northwest might have continued at that measured pace if not for a chance encounter at a food industry conference in Seattle. I was presenting a session on sustainable business models when I noticed a woman in the back row watching me with unusual intensity. Something in her sharp gaze reminded me of someone, though I couldn't place who. She approached afterward, extending her hand. Catherine Holt. Impressive presentation. The name hit me like a physical blow. Holt. As in Senator Holt. As in Vanessa Holt, the woman Jason had betrayed me with. I maintained my composure, shaking her hand with a smile that revealed nothing of my internal shock. Claire Thompson. Thank you for coming. Your approach to ethical business is refreshing, she said. I've spent 10 years in corporate marketing watching companies pretend to care about sustainability while doing the bare minimum. I'd love to hear more about Thompson Roots. Over coffee, Catherine revealed she was Vanessa's older sister, though they hadn't spoken in years. Family estrangement is my personal specialty, she said with a bitter laugh. My father groomed Vanessa to be the perfect political accessory, pretty, polished, and utterly without principles. I refused to play that game. I studied her, weighing risks against opportunities. What happened between you two? Catherine's expression darkened. I blew the whistle on some questionable campaign finance practices in my father's last senatorial race. Vanessa was furious, not because he'd done anything wrong but because I'd threatened the family image. That's all that matters to people like them. She paused, sipping her coffee. I hear she's engaged to some food industry heir now. Poor guy probably has no idea what he's in for. I almost laughed at the irony. If only she knew. 2 weeks later, Catherine Holt became Thomson Roots marketing director. Her insider knowledge of how families like the Holts and Wrights operated proved invaluable. More importantly, her casual mentions of Vanessa's activities with her fiancé Jason kept me informed of my ex-husband's life without ever having to explain why I cared. Vanessa called me out of the blue yesterday, Catherine mentioned casually one afternoon as we reviewed packaging designs. Trying to mend fences apparently. Says she and Jason are having problems. He's drinking too much, the family business is struggling with new market pressures, her words. I think she's realizing that marrying into money isn't all she thought it would be. I kept my expression neutral while satisfaction bloomed inside me. Market pressures? How unfortunate. With Catherine's guidance, Thomson Roots launched a documentary series called From Soil to Table that streamed on our website and social media channels. Each episode highlighted a different aspect of ethical food production: sustainable farming, fair labor practices, transparency in ingredients. We never mentioned Wright delicacies by name. We didn't have to. The contrast between our methods and theirs was implicit in every frame, every interview with happy farmers and workers, every close-up of natural ingredients being transformed through traditional methods. The series went viral in food-conscious circles, earning features in culinary magazines and sustainability blogs. Each new follower, each new customer was another thread in the web I was weaving, a web designed specifically to entangle Wright delicacies. Our growing success required expansion. I deliberately targeted regions where Wright had their strongest distribution: Boston, New York, Chicago. Each Thomson Roots jar on those shelves directly competed with Wright products, often positioned right beside them thanks to strategic slotting fees I'd budgeted for precisely this purpose. The Northeast expansion is cutting deeper into operating capital than we projected, Liam warned during our fourth-year review. Are you sure the Boston market is worth this level of investment? I showed him the latest sales figures. Boston consumers are switching to our products at twice the rate of other markets. Trust me, this is exactly where we need to be. What I didn't tell him was that I'd arranged for something special in the Boston rollout. A blind taste test marketing campaign where consumers compared unlabeled preserves and voted for their favorite. Our blackberry sage preserve, my grandmother's original recipe, consistently outperformed Wright's version by significant margins. But my most satisfying strategy was also the most personal. When Thomson Roots expanded to the East Coast, I initiated what I called our executive feedback program. Under the guise of market research, we sent carefully curated gift baskets to influential business leaders in the food industry, including, of course, the entire Wright family. The feedback forms returned with effusive praise. Thomas Wright himself wrote, "Exceptional quality and depth of flavor. Reminds me of how preserves used to taste before mass production." Vivian noted, "Elegant packaging and sophisticated flavor profiles. This would be appropriate for even the most discerning tables." Jason? His comments were the most gratifying, superior to anything currently on the market. Wright delicacies should consider this a serious competitor. I kept those feedback forms in a special folder, reading them on difficult days when doubts crept in. They hadn't recognized my company name. They certainly wouldn't recognize me when the time came for our paths to cross again. Thomson Roots was still small compared to Wright delicacies, a David to their Goliath. But I had something they didn't: intimate knowledge of their weaknesses, their blind spots, their vulnerabilities. And unlike them, I had nothing to lose. The spider's web was nearly complete. All that remained was to draw them in for the final confrontation, a meeting that would occur at the upcoming National Food Innovation Gala, where industry leaders gathered to network and showcase their latest products. The Wrights would be there. They were always there, basking in their legacy status. This year, Thomson Roots had been nominated for the Rising Star Award, an honor that would put us on the main stage. An honor that would ensure the Wrights would be watching when I stepped up to the microphone. They had discarded me, believing I would disappear into insignificance. Instead, I had transformed into their most dangerous adversary, one they couldn't see coming until it was too late. 7 years of careful planning was about to culminate in a single moment of recognition. And I was ready. 2 weeks before the National Food Innovation Gala, I orchestrated what would appear to be a coincidence but was, in fact, the opening move in my endgame. Lawrence Barrett, Wright Delicacy's largest investor, would be speaking at a sustainable business panel in Boston. I made sure Thompson Roots sponsored the coffee break immediately following his session. Lawrence was exactly as Catherine had described him. Mid-60s, impeccably dressed, with the sharp eyes of someone who built his fortune by seeing opportunities others missed. I approached him as he added cream to his coffee. "Mr. Barrett? Claire Thompson, founder of Thompson Roots. Your panel insights were fascinating." His handshake was firm, his smile practiced. "Thompson Roots, the preserves company from Oregon, correct? Impressive growth trajectory. You've been following our progress?" I asked, feigning surprise. "I follow everything in the specialty foods sector." He studied me with new interest. "Your Rising Star nomination is well-deserved." We chatted about market trends and sustainability initiatives. Then carefully I steered the conversation toward his investment portfolio. "I understand you're a significant investor in Wright Delicacies," I said. "Their traditional approach certainly dominated the market for decades." Barrett's expression shifted subtly at my use of past tense. "Thomas Wright has built a remarkable legacy." "Legacy is a powerful word," I agreed. "Though I sometimes wonder if traditional companies can adapt quickly enough to changing consumer preferences. Our research shows millennials and Gen Z are willing to pay premium prices, but only for genuine transparency and ethical sourcing." I shared selected data from our market analysis. Information that directly highlighted Wright Delicacy's vulnerabilities without ever naming them. Barrett asked increasingly pointed questions. His concern was palpable. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation over dinner next week," he suggested as we parted. "I'd be delighted," I replied, knowing that by then he would be researching Thompson Roots thoroughly and questioning his Wright Delicacies investment. The next day, Catherine burst into my office, her face flushed with excitement. "You won't believe what my sister just told me. She's filing for divorce." My heart skipped a beat. "Vanessa is leaving Jason?" She said he's become impossible to live with. Apparently, Wright Delicacies is in serious financial trouble. Multiple suppliers are threatening to break contracts over late payments. Jason's drinking heavily and Thomas is refusing to change strategies despite falling market share. I kept my expression neutral. "How unfortunate." "Here's the kicker," Catherine continued, leaning forward conspiratorially. "Vanessa is already seeing someone else. Congressman Andrew Fitzgerald. She told me she needs to secure her future with someone who still has one." The ruthless calculation was so perfectly Vanessa, so perfectly Wright adjacent, that I almost admired it. Jason had served his purpose in her life just as I once had in his. The symmetry was poetic. "The gala is going to be awkward for them," I observed, imagining Jason's humiliation. "Especially since they'll both be there." Catherine's eyes widened. "You know what this means for our plan, right? Jason will be vulnerable. Distracted." "Perfect timing," I agreed. Our plan to acquire Wright Delicacies had just become significantly easier. The night of the gala arrived with perfect dramatic timing. A light snow fell over Boston as my car pulled up to the historic hotel venue. I stepped out wearing a gown the color of blackberries, my grandmother's locket around my neck containing a small photo of her, my silent partner in this 7-year journey. Inside, the ballroom glittered with crystal and ambition. Industry leaders networked over champagne while screens displayed the nominated companies. Thompson Roots' promotional video played alongside those of much larger corporations, including Wright Delicacies. I spotted them immediately across the room. Thomas looking older but still imposing, Vivian elegant in midnight blue, surveying the crowd like a general, and Jason handsome as ever but with new lines etched around his eyes, a glass of scotch already in hand. Vanessa was notably absent. I circulated carefully, staying out of their line of sight. Lawrence Barrett caught my eye and nodded meaningfully. Our dinner conversation had clearly had the intended effect. Phase 1, complete. The Rising Star Award was announced midway through the evening. When they called Thompson Roots, applause filled the room. I approached the podium, noticing the Wright family's polite but disinterested expressions. They didn't recognize me, not yet. "Thank you," I began, my voice steady. "Thompson Roots was born from a simple belief. that food should nourish not just our bodies, but our communities and our planet. As I spoke about our journey, I saw Lawrence Barrett approach Thomas Wright, whispering something in his ear. Thomas straightened, his gaze suddenly locked on me with new intensity. The first flicker of doubt. After the ceremony, I circulated strategically until I found myself face to face with Jason. 7 years had changed us both, but while time had added shadows to his features, it had given me a confidence that radiated from within. "Congratulations on your award," he said, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Impressive for such a new company." "Thank you, Jason," I replied, watching for recognition at the sound of his name. "Nothing. I believe business should be built on integrity, not just profits." He nodded absently, clearly not connecting this stranger with his past. "If you'll excuse me, I need to speak with our investors." "Of course," I smiled. "I believe they're quite interested in speaking with you too." I watched him walk away satisfied. The real confrontation would come tomorrow, in the Wright Delicacies boardroom. The following morning, I arrived precisely on time for the meeting Lawrence Barrett had arranged. "A potential investment opportunity," he told the Wrights. They didn't yet know I was there to buy them out. Thomas Wright's face registered confusion when I entered the boardroom. "Miss Thompson? I don't understand." I placed a folder on the table. "My analysis of Wright Delicacies' current position and Thompson Root's offer to acquire controlling interest." The shock in the room was palpable. Jason nearly choked on his coffee. "This is absurd. We're not selling to a startup. Your company's market value has declined 30% in 2 years, I stated calmly. 3 major suppliers are considering breaking contracts. Your core demographic is literally dying off, and younger consumers find your brand outdated and ethically questionable." Thomas's face flushed with anger. "How could you possibly know about our supplier issues?" "The same way I know about your cash flow problems and the loans you've taken against your family estate," I replied. "Due diligence." Jason glared at Barrett. "This is a hostile takeover." "This is business," Barrett replied. "The board has already voted to accept the offer, contingent on today's meeting." I slid the acquisition contract across the table. Jason picked it up, his hands trembling slightly as he flipped through the pages. "Sign it," Thomas ordered, his voice resigned. "We can't fight this." As Jason's pen hesitated over the signature line, I decided it was time. I reached up and removed my grandmother's locket, opening it to reveal her photograph. "Before you sign, you might want to know who you're selling to," I said quietly. Jason looked up, irritation crossing his features, then froze. The pen slipped from his fingers, spattering ink across the contract. "Claire." His voice was barely a whisper. "Hello, Jason. It's been 7 years." Vivian gasped, finally connecting the dots. "Impossible. I believe the term you preferred was unworthy," I replied, my gaze steady. "Funny how things change." Jason signed the contract in stunned silence, unable to form words. As he pushed it back toward me, I slid another document forward. My grandmother's journal entry about the stolen blackberry sage preserve recipe. "You should know that Thompson Root's success wasn't just about business strategy," I explained. "It was about reclaiming what was stolen, including my grandmother Rose Thompson's original recipes that built Wright Delicacies' reputation." Thomas's face drained of color as he recognized the recipe details. His hand clutched at his chest, his breathing suddenly labored. This is slander. "This is documented fact," I corrected as Vivian rushed to her husband's side. "Perhaps you should call a doctor." As paramedics stabilized Thomas for what turned out to be a mild heart attack, I completed the acquisition paperwork. By afternoon, Thompson Roots officially owned Wright Delicacies. My final act was perhaps the most personal. That evening I drove to the Wright estate, my company's property now, though I'd allow them to remain there temporarily. On the doorstep, I left a single jar of blackberry sage preserve in Wright Delicacies packaging, but with a Thompson Roots label carefully placed over it. Attached was a handwritten note, reclaimed, not stolen, just like my worth. 7 years earlier I had walked away with nothing but my name and my dignity. Now I had returned to take everything else. Not out of vengeance but justice, for myself, for my grandmother, for everyone the Wrights had deemed unworthy. In the game they'd started I'd achieved what they never expected. Checkmate. If this story of sweet revenge had you on the edge of your seat, smash that like button right now. Was it when Claire discovered the background check folder? Or maybe when she finally revealed herself in that boardroom? What was your favorite moment from Claire's journey? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more thrilling stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Looking for more stories of karma and justice? Check out my playlist.